Continuing with my own DC cinematic universe, Jonah Hex. We begin in 1912. Somewhere in Arizona, we see an old cowboy ride up to a nowhere place. He lifts his head up, revealing that he's Jonah Hex. I really want this older version of Hex to be played by Clint Eastwood, even though he's like retired and ancient, but whatever. He rides up to a saloon.
I know who you are. You're that Jonah Hex.
Congratulations.
I could shoot 6 bottles off a fence and not miss a one.
Who gives a damn?
Hey, Hex! What happened to your face?
Got myself shaven. What happened to yours?
All the barflies are actually really interested in Hex's story. We've all heard stories about you dealing with time travelers, extraterrestrials, steam-powered war machines, and even being able to talk to the dead. Hex says that last bit is nonsense. But to hear about the extremes of my life, you have to hear where it all began. So he explains his story. He was born November 1st, 1838, north of Independence, Missouri. His parents, Woodson and Jenny, spent basically their entire waking lives arguing with each other. When Woodson wasn't arguing with Jenny and drinking, he was beating his son. Woodson got in plenty of trouble with federal forces due to his beliefs, and Jenny did try sticking up for herself and her son to little success. But eventually, by the time that he turned 13, Jonah's family was moving out to Santa Fe. So Woodson sold all of his valuables, his moonshine still, his home, one of his Aronai Bibles, and least of all, his son. Hex never saw his blood parents ever again, but he knows that his mother did join the temperance movement and became prominent in the party later. The men who took Hex in southern Illinois worked him absolutely to the bone, but a year later the men heard about the gold rush in California and took Hex with them. But on the trail they were attacked by the Apache. The men were killed and they took little Hex. Probably because he was a skinny kid who looked a lot younger than he actually was and was blind in one eye, from one of Pa's whoopings, much like the chief was. He was raised with the tribe, learning their ways, their language, their dance. It was a great time for Hex, probably the happiest point of his entire life. It was happy 9 years of his life. When he finally grew up into being Scott Eastwood, despite living with them for nearly a decade and doing his part for the tribe, many still saw him as an outsider, always bullying and undermining him, especially from the chief's son. But there was always someone that stuck up for him. A beautiful woman, her name meant something like White Fawn. She truly was his white stag. Beautiful, powerful, mysterious. Hex was finally able to prove himself one day when he ended up saving the chief from a puma attack, killing it by himself. The chief was forever indebted, and much of the tribe started liking Hex now. They had a big celebration about it, and he definitely spent the night with White Fawn after it. But the chief's son, Noah Tente, grew in more hatred and jealousy for Hex. That his father and White Fawn loved Hex more than him. But a week later, a group of Apache, including Hex and Notante, were tasked to steal some horses from a nearby tribe. And we see Hex stealth taking out a bunch of the guards, and it's really cool. But Notante makes a lot of noise, probably intentionally alerting the tribe, as he throws a knife into Hex's leg. He manages to take the horses as Hex gets captured. Early morning, Notante reports back to the Apache with the horses, claiming that Jonah got them caught, and his stupidity led to everyone else's death. But Notante thinks it's lucky that he made it out with his own life and the horses. Meanwhile, it's really not the Kiowa's day, as United States forces that were hunting buffalo find the tribe and start attacking. They quote-unquote save Hex and bring him with him. Jonah works as a farmhand in Arkansas for a little while until 1862, where he's drafted into the Army of the Confederate States of America, becoming a cavalry scout. Under the command of Hickman, Jonah found family again, making best friends with Jeb Turnbull. At the time, Jonah didn't really know what the war was about, other than independence, but he didn't really care because he found companionship and a new family. Even if the coffee is terrible. During another battle in Arkansas, during which we see the Spectre and Norman being the Watchers. It's a brief skirmish that's a Confederate victory, mostly because of Jeb and Jonah, sending the Union into retreat. In the aftermath, Jonah's cavalry squad meets up and joins with Quentin Turnbull, Jeb's dad, who's a general, and he has some slave workers to cook for him. Over dinner, Turnbull and Quentin discuss plans to invade into Springfield, Missouri, And Jonah finds it's kind of weird that all the dark-skinned people are just the cooks and aren't in army uniforms, what gives. And they're getting talked and treated to really badly. But one soldier reminds Hex they're their whole reason they're fighting, to prolong their slavery. Hex gets that realization that he might have joined the baddies. So very late that night, when everyone was asleep, he ended up saving the slaves, sending them up north. As he surrendered in Missouri, he managed to sneak into the general's quarters, and because it is like super early in the morning, he's comedically still in bed. And same Union general from earlier. As the Union general gets dressed, Hex explains to him he's here to defect and help them deal with the forces heading to Springfield. Just as a Freeman soldier alerts the general that someone snuck into the camp, comedically too late, and Hex tells them where the Confederate soldiers are. So during sunrise, the Confederate soldiers are caught completely off guard as they're all captured. The general thanks Jonah Hex out loud, saying if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't be able to capture 500 Confederate soldiers. But as he's getting called a hero, the Confederates call him a traitorous snake and spit at him, which makes Jonah feel kind of bad for his old family, especially his best friend Jeb. So later that night, he sneaks into the prison they're being held at and he tries getting Jeb out, but one thing leads to another and he tries escaping with everyone, which alerts the guards, and this leads many of the Confederates, including Jeb, being shot. But many, including Arkman, General Turnbull, and Jonah, escaped. And when Jonah thinks they got far away enough, one of them knocks Jonah out. He comes to, crucified, and confused, as Quentin Turnbull explains to him that he's a traitor to both sides, Confederate States and United States. You stole my property, you let it go, and you led to the death of my son. I'm gonna make you feel how I feel. Him, Arkman, and the remaining soldiers torture Hex, and eventually Quentin takes out a hot burner, saying here's a little something to get people to remember you for. Jonah's left out in the elements and set adrift upriver, till eventually another Native American group finds him and lets him go. They nurse him back to health, but he eventually gets his clothes back and he heads out, back to his old home with the Apache. Everyone's surprised to see him as the audience finally sees his scar. He reunites with White Fawn, who's glad to see him, but kind of awkwardly, since the 3 years he's been gone, she got together with Notante and had a daughter. He's a little upset about this, but then Chief finds him and he starts questioning how he's alive. He gets his story straight, saying Notante, no shit. Notante arrives and he tries backpedaling and saying oh, it's a miracle, Hex survived. But Jonah says the real events to everyone, and Notante says that's bullshit. But the chief knows how to settle this. An honorable, topless tomahawk fight. But Notante had the other tomahawk for Hex rigged. So during their fight, Jonah's tomahawk breaks. Notante is also fighting really dirty by kicking Jonah in the balls and throwing him over a cliffside, away from the rest of the tribe. They continue their fight, but Jonah finds a sleeve they have a trick to pull out of. He stabs Notante in the chest with a Bowie knife, just as the rest of the tribe arrives. They yell that Jonah cheated, but Jonah says that Notante was fighting without honor first, claiming that Jonah's tomahawk was already broken, but the guy who gave them the tomahawk says that no they weren't, and he doesn't really have that much evidence. But the chief says something like, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and that was my son after all. It pains me to say this, but you're exiled from the tribe. So Jonah grabs his stuff, he has a goodbye kiss with White Fawn, and he rides off into the sunset, abandoned by both his families. He tries drowning his sorrows as he witnesses someone in the saloon acting and saying stuff very similar to his dad, so he yells for him to take his hands off the lady. They take this outside, and Jonah shoots him first. The sheriff walks up to Jonah, thanking him because that was Mad Dog, and he tries giving him a reward, but Jonah doesn't care. It ain't about the money. It's about justice. And that's how he started his career as a bounty hunter. What about them future people and extraterrestrialers and mechanical peoples? Well, that's just a story for another time. But then he hears something outside, and it's an alien invader. And Jonah screams, I guess it's sooner than I thought. The end. The theme of the film definitely has to be Wanted, Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. And then the end credits, we see Jonah, younger, playing a guitar. And suddenly, a time portal opens. and Batman appears asking for what time period is this? Setting up the next film. But what do you guys think? You still like my ideas? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you did.